Yeah, good evening.
All right, good sound check. I'd like to call to order the October 9th, 2024 City Council Workshop. It's 5:31 PM. Sorry, I started a minute late. It's my own darn fault. We have a couple of things on the agenda for tonight's workshop. I will let everybody know that we have a full quorum, although Gary is on Zoom. Let's not forget about him. I hope you're feeling well, Gary, and I hope your family is doing well.
Yeah, thank you.
First item on the agenda is the proposed development code amendment, wildfire defensible space standards. Planner Martin. And with some help. Hi.
Some backup.
We'll back up.
Kind of backup I like. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, councilors. Matthew Martin, Principal Planner, City of Sisters. I'm joined by Jeff Puller, Fire Marshal, and Chief Pryor from Sisters Camp Sherman Fire District to talk about some conceptual or draft defensible space standards for our implementation and incorporation into the Sisters Development Code. My presentation tonight is in support of the written materials that you received in advance of tonight's meeting. In particular, the packet includes formal draft language for the development code, whereas my comments today are going to be high level, just hitting on the primary themes and topics that are included there, noting that they're in draft form and there'll be additional work to refine those and then audit the entirety of the code to make sure that all the key points are connected with other chapters and provisions of the code. So happy to field any questions or comments throughout. My goal is to field those questions or receive any comments or direction from the council so that we can move forward with refining the amendments and then carry it forward for formal review and adoption process. So what we've been talking about for a good while, perhaps over a year plus, but since the adoption of the council's goals this year was to update the development code relative to adding defensible space standards to mitigate those the impacts and provide resiliency for the community as it relates to those impacts from wildfire. So what are we talking about? Those defensible space standards, that's where you're providing fire and fuel breaks around structures and fuel treatments, building practices, et cetera, that result in a more resilient environment that protects both structures and people from the impacts of wildfire. And in that regard, the Council has previously given the direction that these defensible space standards should be applicable to the city as a whole, the entirety of the city limits. And that's a distinction or differentiation from the defensible space rules that the Oregon State Fire Marshal is developing in conjunction with Senate Bill 762, where those rules would be only applicable to those high hazard properties located within the, located within the wildland urban interface and also mapped high hazard on the statewide wildfire risk map.
The WUI.
The WUI. So from those draft maps, what we saw was that only a portion of the city was located in both the WUI and the high hazard risk designation. So that would be only limited in its provisions and applicability in the city. But we're given the opportunity to go further and apply it to the city as a whole. So what we looked to were those draft rules from the State Fire Marshal's office, as well as City of Ashland and other communities that have defensible space standards and comprehensive package of standards, but really leaned on City of Ashland, knowing that they're a leader in the state in implementing a variety of programs to address wildfire and the risks and mitigation.
We're going to become the next leader or the full-on leader if we can. I do want to address the public a little bit and say that because if half the city by the state standards is high risk and the other half is not, we decided as a council that it's pretty clear that if some of us are high risk, we're all high risk, right? I mean, it just kind of makes sense. So that's why we're doing a citywide plan. We think it's just responsible to do so. Does anybody have any? No. Okay, that's true though, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, just making sure I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for all of us. Go ahead, sorry about that.
Yeah, and noting from those, the research and understanding of the City of Ashland's program is it's a strong collaboration with Community Development Department and implementation of the development code, but also with the fire department and in our case, the fire district, because there are roles for each department and both review authority and collaboration and coordination that's necessary to take advantage of the expertise that they have at the fire district, but noting that's a bit different as separate entities instead of separate departments of one jurisdiction. But so with these development code amendments, they're intended to be applicable to new development, that being land divisions, partitions, subdivisions, and those developments subject to site plan review. Those are your larger commercial developments, multifamily developments, as prescribed in our code. But also goes a bit further and applies to all properties that obtain a building permit. And those building permits would be for new buildings or structures or additions to existing structures with a threshold of at least 200 square feet of additional lot coverage or footprint for those structures. So either one of those applications or standard permitting requirements will trigger the implementation of these standards. And noting that the included in there is what's called a fire prevention and control plan. That'd be a supplement to any land division or site plan review applications we receive. We also already require a series of drawings for development. And so actually with this prevention and control plan, there is some redundancy in the requirements. So in one particular plan set, it doesn't necessarily need to be a separate drawing, but can be incorporated into the plan set that they're already providing. But there's a level of detail in that goes above and beyond, including species that are of vegetation that's going to be either introduced or existing on the property. The locations, kind of more specifically than we may already receive. And but in my review of those requirements, much of it is something that we already asked for. So within the standards that were provided and what we'll be speaking to today is reference to prohibited plant lists or those highly flammable plant species that have been identified as just that, have a high flammability rate and therefore provide a higher risk of ignition, higher ignition source, and then therefore resulting in a greater potential for spread. It's quite clear in looking at this list that these are many of our native species that we have in the region and that we value in our community. But that's not to say that they can't be present. It's just how they are managed on a particular property in proximity to structures.
Question. So on this list from the fire department
Of Ashland.
of Ashland, they have 3 other trees. So this is just a point of clarification in the prohibited shrubs. And I'm just wondering why we left off bitter brush, Himalayan blackberry, and sagebrush.
That may very well have just been oversight
Oh.
in the materials that provided. So intent was to be consistent with what
Okay.
City of Ashland was
Okay.
identifying. So we can
All
make
right.
note of that.
And have you looked at the OSU Extension's newest list when you were compiling this as well? Because it's a little bit more specific to Central Oregon.
Nope, but we'll
Okay.
certainly will do that.
Yeah. I think it just was updated this year finally, so. It's a good resource.
Yeah, Council Ross here. I think I did see bitter brush and the other shrubs that were mentioned in the document that came to the house in the packet. Or I saw it somewhere, and I thought I saw it in the board packet, so.
It might just be your presentation material.
Yeah,
Perhaps,
it might just not be on the slide, but I think it was in the board packet.
yep.
Oh.
It's not in the packet because I have a copy of it here.
Yeah.
Oh darn, well, I tried.
Yeah, it's okay.
We've already identified the benefit of this workshop to note the updated plant list to reference here that's specific to Central Oregon and any oversight from the draft materials. So success already.
I'd like to add some more species, anything that Council President Blum has on her property, I'd really like to just throw them all on it. I'm just kidding.
Like as if anybody would actually plant bitter brush. Come on.
Anyway, go ahead, sorry.
So you'll see throughout the standards and tonight's comments referencing those highly flammable plants. This is the list that we're looking to. And it's incomplete at this point, but can be fully vetted as noted. So within the defensible space area, and again, I'm just going to note just on a high level what we're talking about. That being removal of all dead and dying vegetation that's on the property itself. It's not specific to any circles or distance from structures, but rather looking at the property as a whole and removing that hazardous vegetation that is likely to be dry and highly have ignition source. And then new plantings of highly flammable vegetation is prohibited within 30 feet of a structure. Again, noting that those species are allowed, but they can't be in that close proximity to the structure itself. And going further, looking to remove any existing highly flammable vegetation within 5 feet of the structure. So it's that from wall out, we'd be looking for that to be removed and either be hardscape or other non-combustible or fire-resistant vegetation. Do want to note that there is an exception for significant trees. Our code defines significant trees already as those trees that are 8-inch diameter at breast height, or DBH. 8-inch, if I said that correctly, would allow them to be within that proximity to the structure. We were just looking for other measures such as additional limbing or separation of the tree structure from the building as far as you can within the health of the tree, but those can be retained and maintained in a safe manner with consultation and approval from the fire district. Then noting also that combustible materials such as bark mulch, firewood, wood fencing is also prohibited within 5 feet of any structure. So it doesn't mean that you cannot connect a fence to your building or structure to provide a security barrier or some other just barrier itself, but just that within that initial 5-foot area, requiring some non-combustible or fire-resistant material, either as a metal gate or other fire-rated or resistant materials that will prevent that fire from, or the fence serving as a wick is what I've heard it described as, is that the fire can ignite a wood fence and run all the way up to the structure quickly. So providing that additional separation.
So I would like to add that, I mean, this is great. Thank you. There's different, obviously, levels and organizations that kind of put out recommendations. Personally, the one that we like the best is IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. They kind of have the most stringent requirements, and they do a hell of a lot of research, and they burn a lot of stuff to to get to that point. So, and for example, in that, the 5-foot fire, the 5-foot zone is basically now just nothing. Like it's hardscape, it's bare dirt, it's gravel, and that's it, like nothing else. And I kind of want to, and that's also for a few reasons. One is that, you know, I've just found the research is over and over again is realizing, I mean, that 5-foot zone is just critical, you know, for ignition and, you know, embers and stuff like that. So, and though it seems like a little, no pun intended, scorched earth to kind of have this space around your house where there isn't, well, like isn't anything. Um, what I feel is that if we set that as the standard, there's always going to be mission creep. There's always going to be oh, I'm going to just stack this little bit of kindling here for a few months against the house. Oh, I'm going to put my wooden tools up against the house in the summertime. Like, you know, I feel like if we kind of make that as stringent as possible, we know that people are going to make mistakes and not on purpose, but life happens, right? I mean, you're welcome to go to our house and see the mistakes. We still have a few that we haven't addressed yet. But I personally feel like if we can, you know, this is in line with IBHS, and for good reason, well tested. And I feel like if we just kind of, it's also just very clear, like here are the, you know, you can have gravel, you can have dirt, you can have pavers, and that's it. I mean, it's pretty clear as a property owner to understand that.
That's pretty stringent.
It is,
I would have
however,
to review that. I
well,
mean, as far as what I see as, you know,
yeah. My second point in that is that, you know, we have this current plague in Central Oregon and lots of places in the country where insurance is getting pulled from homeowners and property owners willy-nilly. And I have not yet in our line of work with my family seen any insurance agency yet kind of hitch their wagon to IBHS, even though they fund IBHS, and that's where all this stuff comes from. However, as a city, if we can put on paper that, look, we have adopted code that follows IBHS, and it gives us really good footing with the insurance industry, you know, if we start to kind of wrestle with, you know, the industry, whether it's a property owner or the city itself, that, hey, you know, we're following the standard that, you know, was kind of come out of your industry, you know, so if you got problems with that, that's not us, that's on you guys. And so I think it just gives us this, you know, a little bit of a safety net in that we can always go back and say, this is IBHS. We didn't make this up. You know, we didn't invent it. This is well rooted, you know, and has a, you know, its feet in the insurance industry. So, yeah, and the 5-foot thing is a challenge for sure. But, you know, we've, you know, in our business, we've worked with a lot of people on this, and people have a hard time with it initially and then are able to realize that there are actually some significant benefits landscaping wise. And, you know, we've had clients that were like, oh, I love having this buffer around my house. It's like I pushed the irrigation out. So it's like, I'm not watering my house anymore. You know, my sprinklers are running. I can actually walk around my house and not get wet. You know, it's,
Have that film on the windows.
yeah, you know, but it's just one of those things that, it's just over and over again. And the research is just, it keeps coming back to that 5-foot thing. I mean, and there's other things, but it's one of those things that people just like, look, if you can just do this 5-foot thing, you know, this is going to be big, in, you know, in saving your property and saving your life. So, that's my 2 cents on that, you know, kind of building off that model of the 5-foot and going down to like the, you know, the zones basically.
So I don't have a problem with that. I see the logic in what you're suggesting. But I did have my house, you know, assessed for, it's my defensible space by the fire department.
can you turn on your mic, please?
By the fire department earlier this year. And when I did, I do have plants that are near my house, and I do have dirt in between. But they didn't ask me to leave the take out the plants because they're watered they're irrigated and they're not dry. I don't have any dead plants. And in the winter, they just all die down and then it's dirt until they come up again. So I don't know, I don't know about this in IVHS. I don't know if there's like a little, is it really you have to have naked, naked ground for 5 feet? Or can
Well,
you have a little
I-
plant here and there?
I think it's a little bit of a sociological call on their part because, yeah, you can, I think you do get that, case a lot, like, oh, well, it's watered and there's not a lot of plants, stuff like that. But, that's that, then you're relying on a system that, okay, well, are they watering it? Did they leave on vacation and it failed and they're gone for 2 months and everything's died? And now it's, plants do die off and then they, the leaves blow and they accumulate more debris. That's, definitely left on the property owner to like stay on top of that constantly.
Sure.
And is that,
Okay.
I think that's why they've kind of gone to that place of this is very simple, like, look, just don't have anything and then we don't have anything to worry about anymore. But yeah, I mean, I
I get your
100%
point.
understand that. Yeah, I mean, I had those same questions too.
Yeah, I think it's something we might have to consider, or, but I'd want to definitely think about it and kind of see, see how this is.
Yeah.
The rest of it.
Does the fire department have something to say relative to that?
Well, I
That's-
would add the 0 to 5 feet that you're talking about, the most important zone, right, that we're talking about. We know that fire is gonna come at some point in time, and it's most likely gonna come in the form of an ember, half-mile in front of a flame front, and it's gonna hit your house, and it's gonna drop to the ground, and we want that ember to burn out. And the only way that's gonna happen is we eliminate those ignition sources in that 0 to 5 feet, whether that's rock or dirt or gravel. Yes, when the fire department does their assessments right now, we're following the FireWise recommendations. We do not have the authority to enforce. We are just making recommendations. So we are looking at plants though. I'm sure if it was a juniper bush, we were saying, we highly recommend you take that out.
Yeah.
If it was a plant that was identified in the OSU booklet, then we're talking about, this is a fire resistant plant. If you're gonna have a plant, it's better to have this plant than a juniper bush. So we look at that too with that zone. But yeah, the 0 to 5, the most important zone. And that's what we are preaching the most. And then we move out from there.
So FireWise and OSU lists are more like what the city of Ashland is doing, and IVHS is certainly the most stringent you can, because it's no plants. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what's that?
Is that the main difference between the two that you're aware of?
I think at this point, I mean, I was consulting with my home-based expert and he said that, cause I even asked about lawn, like watered lawn and he's like, basically lawn's kind of out as well because if it doesn't get watered and, and it, gets thatchy and dry and, can be a risk as well. And depending on the circumstances, and it can catch embers much easier or, can accumulate debris over, weeks that you haven't cut it or, so, yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're aware of what you're talking about, and we can consider that
Okay.
individually and make recommendations to staff what they'd rather have. A list of 5 feet or nothing, I guess is.
I'd like to commend you guys on moving forward with this for one, because you guys get the chance to be the leader in Central Oregon. As you look at the map or the plan that's put out before you, guys have a chance to make some tweaks and changes with that, with what's on this list, but you're moving forward with something here. So if we get going and you decide what you want to have, it's consistent with what we're going out and doing our home inspections and from here to the future, because you're looking at the UDB and where is that going to be and how is that going to be developed in the future. And so, as Matt was saying, with the permit process that comes forward, it's not going to really affect the people that already have homes here as a new homeowner in the city. I have a fence that comes right up to the side of the house. So some of those things that, you know, I'll be looking at as well, but you have the chance now, and I think it's great that you're moving forward with it.
Is there any other city in our region that has anything like this or?
Ashland's the leader.
Okay.
California has quite a few cities, Marin, California, so it was a.
So we're kind of leading the charge here.
Bend is looking at it.
There are HOAs, separate, communities that are more stringent, because they've chose to do that on their own that I know of. But I was just wondering about the cities for sure.
The county requires it in some areas, like in the West Side Transect of Bend. That
Mhm.
was part of that, urban growth boundary expansion mitigation, so all those neighborhoods on the west side have to have these written into their CCNRs
Yeah,
and they are pretty stringent.
there are 5, 30, and 100. There's actually a second.
Yeah, because a lot of those places can be, like
Yeah.
half an acre to 5 acres or something like
Yes.
that. And then also in the county, if you are zoned forest,
Yep.
you're required to do this.
All right, Gary, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I want to jump in here a little bit. I think that this is whether we go with the IVHS or this language. I think it's important. But I think that we also have to consider as we look at, especially new development, with our smaller lot sizes and our higher density as part of our mitigation on the UGB expansion. You're going to have intrusion into other people's defensible space, plants and material in a neighbor's yard that the neighbor's perfectly happy to leave and may actually put your house at risk. I have that here. My neighbor has several large trees with a lot of dead branches at the bottom, and he doesn't want me to prune them off. And they're a concern for me because they're all ladder fuel. And they drop lots of needles on the grass. So I do have a lawn that would very easily catch fire running down that side of the house. So I think that something that's stringent and clear probably works best for everybody in the long run. And it's not going to solve everyone's problems, but I think that I've mixed feelings on the IVHS not having read it. So that's where I am with it right now. Not that I disagree with anything that I'm hearing, but I do think that we need to take into consideration too, when looking at defensible space, at the properties next door and how they might impact the property that's being examined.
Well, I mean, the side yard setback is 5 feet in most areas, most residential areas now. So that's the whole thing. That's the whole.
Yeah, and the problem is that trees don't understand 5-foot setbacks.
Understood. I'm going to be a little bit of a time hawk and let Matt continue on. Do you know how much time you have on this?
Couple more slides, just
Okay.
again, just hitting the high points, but I'm glad we took this moment to pause and have that general discussion. I think.
Okay.
that's
But
Probably
I
the
do
bulk of
want
it.
to comment on fences, if I may, Mayor. I think we need to look at having some kind of regulation against fencing. I know in the Timber Creek HOA, the fencing is limited to a certain number of feet by a house, and it's never to enclose a house, a property. And it allows the pass-through of the deer and whatnot, and it also keeps fire away from buildings. So it's something I think we should consider.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Noting again that with highly flammable trees, that they shall be pruned to provide 10 feet of clearance from new buildings and additions. That'd be setback, a distance from building to tree, edge of drip line. And with a carve out for those trees that if they're too close or of a size that that limbing may compromise the health or the vitality of the tree. And that's where we'd be consulting with the fire district on their recommendation on how far to go or consider removal in those circumstances. And then noting if there's a chimney present on the property or on the structure, that there needs to be 10 feet of separation of all trees and vegetation from that chimney feature. And then we're talking about canopy spacing. That would be from tree to tree or groupings of trees. There's an opportunity to identify groups of trees as one tree with respect to canopy spacing. But the idea is that you provide that 10 feet of space so that flame length cannot jump from tree to tree, and then the fire will run across the landscape. Then we're talking about ladder fuels and limbing up from the ground. City Ashland is above and beyond State Fire Marshal. State Fire Marshal requires 6 feet of limbing for ladder fuels. Ashland recommends or implements 8 feet of pruning from ground up. And then speaking of ladder fuels, that those are maintained and trimmed down. We do have weed and grass and shrub abatement standards in our code now. So we'd be making sure that those align, but the idea is that vegetation is kept down. And the last 2 points being if you're with a new structure or at least 50% of replacement of a roof of an existing structure, that roofing materials are required to be fire resistant. We have a provision similar to this in the municipal code now that prohibits wood shake shingles. This would be comparable to that and requiring this Class B fire resistance requirement.
So my understanding is Class B includes impregnated shake shingles that with fire retardant. And I feel like we might just be better off for clarity to just say Class A, which, you know, includes asphalt, tile, slate, and metal roofs. There are companies that make faux shingle roofs now. If you want the look, you know, you can get that with, you know, I feel like, you know, the treated shingles is just a slippery slope that A, treatments fade over time, and B, it's just it's a visual that we don't need. It's just people think, well, they got one, so like, you know, there's no way to look at one and say, oh, that's been treated. To my knowledge, you know, so and I mean, I don't see a lot of people running around putting shake shingles on their roofs anyway, but it just seems like if we just said Class A, it's just cleaner.
I'm 100% okay with Class A roof.
And I agree as well.
Me too. No problem.
So there you go. If we're gonna lead, you gotta, you know, you kind of gotta lead.
Yeah.
I'd say 99% of houses that are built today, custom homes, even Hayden homes, you know, they're all Class A, right?
Yeah.
So
We're cl- we're-
let's just do a Class A. Huh? There we go.
We're Class A people.
I mean, you know, I agree. And it's really not about the shingles. It's just about if it's Class A, it's the top requirement and it's easily met with materials that are already made. You're not asking somebody to do something
No.
that they wouldn't do if they were building a house. You're just telling people they can't go below that. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Go ahead.
And
There
my-
you go.
My last comment and highlight
Thanks.
is that built into the code are opportunities for exception or waiver from some of these standards for special circumstance. What are those examples being that do you have the presence of those significant trees or those groupings of trees identified as one canopy area, or you have vegetation in floodplain or wetland, other sensitive areas, and considering what the building itself is constructed of. It may be entirely fire resistant, so there's opportunity to encroach closer. So those exceptions and waivers are with direct consultation with the fire district so that we understand their perspectives on allowing those deviations.
I had a question about the, the trees. When you talk about that they need to be limbed up to whatever height we designate, are we talking about existing trees already on the site? Because when you plant a new tree, its limbs are going to be real close to the ground.
Right, so it would be those existing trees and then the ongoing maintenance of
Okay,
trees
so
moving forward.
we have a lot of infill in our neighborhood. So would it be a code enforcement that would come out and determine whether or not the property was being maintained properly. And so this house could have it really low and this house could have it really low, and then this one couldn't, right in the middle, because it's the only new one.
Yeah, with these standards, we would, the appropriate course of action would be to engage with code enforcement and go through that evaluation process. That would follow the structure of our code enforcement program, typically complaint driven. And then we would follow up and investigate and remedy any of those violations. I think there's also, and I'm speaking for the fire district, that through all of this, there's an extension that is educational opportunities through the fire district and their expertise to outreach to citizens to understand the importance of not only establishing these defensible spaces, but maintaining them, because if they're not maintained, their effectiveness is compromised.
So Jennifer mentioned something that I thought we should clarify. I build a no home and comply with all of the regulations, and a year down the road, I decide to pile wood on my metal deck. Is that a code violation?
There's carve outs for temporary opportunities, but not for anything of long term. So what we'd be looking, that would be a violation. And if we could substantiate that violation, we would pursue code enforcement. That can be challenging if that pile of wood is in the back, or in an area that we as staff cannot substantiate. But I think with adoption of this and kind of, again, repeating that, and mechanism here is the educational opportunities to identify what those standards are and the importance of maintaining them, because this is for new development. I think another prong is to encourage and incentivize creating defensive space on existing sites.
Well, that would be municipal code change or,
That would be another prong of the
yeah,
project.
yeah. I mean, yeah, we can't have one without the other, personally, I
Yeah,
believe.
I agree.
So, we got to start somewhere. I had a question about, I know you were using, in there, the, for decks or, the 200-foot parameter or addition or something like that. And I wanted to, I was just confused kind of why 200, usually, because I think, you can, usually what we do is we just include any structure, whether it's close to the main structure or, either away. I know a lot of sheds are under the 200-foot size, so you don't need a permit to get that. And I kind of understand that, because you're not having to get a permit and this doesn't trigger this process. So, however, people like to keep things in sheds like, fuel, ammunition, all the flammable things you don't want near your house, you put in your shed. So I think that the same 5-foot, rules and everything still should apply to other structures on properties as well.
Whether they're permitted or not,
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
yeah,
Well,
So,
the
and I-
200 square foot portion of this for additions is mainly because that is a trigger for when you come in to do an addition, you're gonna add 2 10 by 10 bedrooms, 200 square feet. Boom, there's a trigger to look at the whole property. What you're saying is is more on the enforcement side, which is, hey, this doesn't apply just to, new homes. It applies to existing homes and ancillary accessory structures on the same property. I don't know if that's what we're talking about here or if that's what we're even going for, but I just want to make that distinction, right?
Yeah, it wasn't extending to existing structures or those that may not trigger that building permit requirement.
Right.
I think that the challenge is if it's not triggered by any building permit, we may not become aware of it. So that building permit is that kind of gateway to
The trigger kind of, but the other thing is, and you kind of already mentioned it before, which is, right now we're talking about new structures. Doesn't mean we don't want to do existing structures, but it's probably going to be a longer and more complicated conversation just because there's 1,000 different scenarios of existing structures across the city. Doesn't mean I don't want to do it, but I think we're not concentrating on that. We're trying to concentrate on new structures because we have a UGB expansion process ongoing and we want to get this thing into place, I think is
It's lower hanging fruit to
right. I
new
mean,
stuff as opposed to
Yeah.
retroactively applying it to existing.
but as soon as, you know, whatever we come up with, as soon as we have that in place, we can start working on the next part, right?
Yeah, and you just said there's a lot of different ways to approach it. Sheds, for example, can be independently regulated.
Right.
You have to permit a shed, it has to look a certain way, it has to be a certain distance from the structure and.
I don't know if I want to do that, but
know,
I
I'm
does,
saying that's
no,
why-
I understand what you're saying.
Gary.
Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick add-on. I think that this is a good start. I don't think we're done with it. And I hope we're not done with it for a long time. What I mean is, I think we're gonna have to come back and visit this again fairly soon, perhaps early in the next year. I think we need to talk about deck replacement as being one of the things we need to look at. Most of the decks I see around are either cedar or some form of pine. And as they get older, they become extremely flammable. And when we talk about not having a fence up next to the house, how about a 70 or 80 square foot deck sitting out there fully exposed with pine needles on it or underneath it where you can't get at them? So I think we need to talk about, like we do a roof, maybe when we start looking at deck replacement, we need to start looking at less flammable materials for the actual deck surface.
Gary's stalking my house, obviously.
No, I'm thinking about my house.
Thanks, Gary.
It is a good question. Are decks handled as part of the structure in terms of defensible space? 5 foot buffer starts at the deck or at the,
The perimeter of the deck.
perimeter of the deck, yeah.
It's considered part of this, the building, the
Structure,
footprint.
yeah.
Yep.
But if
Yeah.
it's metal, it's not catching on fire. There are metal decks out there.
Well, best practice is to also, if it, if it's off the ground at all, to put screening around the base of it, so nothing's accumulating underneath it. You never ever get to clean up ever.
I have wood lattice around my deck, my wood deck. So how about that? With needles in there too.
I know, it's.
I'm ready to go.
We're all
Yeah,
like that.
this-
So am I wrong? I thought there was a part in here about adding a deck or adding an extra building on a property. Weren't you just talking about that a little bit ago?
Yeah, so those are addressed. It's whether it's being
Okay.
triggered by or part of the permit application. But again, if it were a decking, we'd be looking at that as one footprint in conjunction with the building.
Okay.
And just so people know, you can build your own deck without a building permit if it's 18 inches or less off the ground. That's a state building code requirement, though. If you're not building a high deck, if you're building a low deck, you don't have to get a building permit. And the reason that's important is because that building permit is one of the triggers to having everything else looked at. So,
Okay.
And I wanted to say, I'm really impressed that.
you guys are here.
The fire department is working together on this project. That's not unfortunately the case in a lot of places, which is frustrating. So I'm very happy that you guys
Yeah,
are.
we're happy to be
you're
working with you.
Working together on this because nobody can do this on their own, there's codes, there's enforcement, there's education. There's not one agency that can do that. So thank you for participating.
So keep moving, I guess. Yeah.
And knowing that we're a bit over time, I appreciate the additional time. I wanted to acknowledge the district staff and if you have any other comments as we close.
No, just thanks for the opportunity to be here with you guys. I think what you guys are doing is phenomenal. We're doing the best we can to educate people through the Fire and Life Safety Division of the district. And what you're doing is similar to what we're trying to get the message out everywhere in all of the subdivisions that we're going to right now. So we thank you for the opportunity and we look forward to supporting the city in the plan reviews and those things.
Well, I mean, and I've said this before, and I think I'm speaking for all of council. It's really our biggest fear is fire in this community. I mean, we talk about public safety, about, crosswalks and traffic and all this other stuff, but if a fire comes through, crosswalks don't matter, right? So this is our biggest fear, and we're addressing it, purposefully. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is the significant tree removal. I apologize for going over time, but we will take as much time as you need, and if the city council meeting has to start late, that's okay. You just turned it off.
Nora, no,
You got to hold it down just a little slower. There you go.
there.
Oh, all right.
On air.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Jacob Smith. I do code enforcement for the city here. Here to discuss a proposed amendment to the development code, addressing a significant tree removal on developing properties. Just to kind of hit on what Mr. Martin already discussed. We have two main issues: significant trees. That's an 8-inch diameter measured from 4.5 feet up from the ground. I'm going to consider that the DBH of the tree. Developing properties, just like it was covered, it's going to be building building permits will trigger that, but then you have the normal development of subdivisions and houses and new buildings and things like that. So we're specifically dealing with those situations with this portion of code. Currently for this portion of code, if someone came in to develop a property, they would go through the planning process, and there would be trees, significant trees that would need to be saved. And that's again what we're dealing with. If those trees were removed today, it is a straight $500 fine. And that's basically the only thing that can be done. So in order to look into this issue more, I looked into other municipalities, what they were doing for tree removal as far as penalties. I put together 3 different versions of potential codes, kind of running the gambit from less penalty to more. I took that code, those code options to the Urban Forestry Board on May 13th of this year to discuss any feedback that they had on that. The options that were brought to them started, option 1 was a $500 to a $2,000 fine. And that kind of matches what we have with our private significant tree removal. Option 2, split the trees up into 2 different categories. One being trees with the DBH from 8 to 20. If those were illegally removed, that would be a $2,000 fine, and anything above 20-inch DBH would be a $4,000 fine. The final option was a $300 per inch of the DBH. The Urban Forestry Board really liked the charge per DBH, but they were also interested in additional fines for the value of the tree. Dan Galecki with Spindrift Forestry Consulting was there at this Urban Forestry Board meeting. He brought up some suggestions for how that could be done and some criteria that we could use to do that. I took this information, wrote up a code, trying to follow the suggestions they gave me. I returned back to the Urban Forestry Board on July 8th of this year. And they passed a motion, an advisory motion to recommend the language, and that passed unanimously. Next, I took that version of the code and we went to the Planning Commission with it. Again, doing the same thing, soliciting feedback on the proposed code change. We did more discussion with the Planning Commission about how this would look, the enforcement itself, what options people would have as far as appealing or things like that. We discussed dead trees and dangerous trees. And so just a lot of talk about how the code would work officially. Ultimately, they did not recommend any changes to that code. And so lastly now, I'm here in front of you to see if there's any feedback on this proposed code language. I went through that real fast, but obviously I can answer any questions.
So just to be clear, the Planning Commission basically backed the Urban Forestry Board on this text, this draft text that you came up with. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
they did not suggest any code or any language change.
Right.
That's pretty amazing, actually. They looked at that and didn't have any changes. That's Interesting.
Go ahead.
I read the minutes from the various meetings and was concerned about the legal concern of having two fines. And I wondered if we could just have one fine, just a lot larger, that would include the quality of the tree we lost, the significance, et cetera. And I would like to propose that it's 500 an inch. That would mean an 8-inch tree, which is the minimum size that we would call significant, would be 4K, 10-inch tree, 5K, 20-inch tree, 10K, and the 42-inch tree that was taken out before would be 21K, which seems to me a deterrent. I don't think right now the funding amount of fine is enough of a deterrent. And I think it was pretty clear from the public that they were really upset about that tree being taken down, and $500 was insulting. So that's my 2 cents there.
So the code as it's written today has the option to add the value of the tree. I'm not familiar with that process. But according to Dan Galecki, that value of the tree can be extremely significant into the, there's going to be a lot of leeway depending on the size of the tree, but upper ends of what you even already mentioned and above and beyond that. So I think as it's written, depending on the size of the tree, I think there is a significant penalty that could come depending on that size of the tree, if we do both the DBH and the value.
And I understood that. And then I also was concerned about the concern by legal that having two different fines might cause us to have a suit. So I felt, why not come out of the gate with the higher fine in the first place, biddy bob, biddy boom.
No matter the species or value of the tree is what you're saying.
No, if
Just make it simple, like one time, bam.
if we've designated it as a significant tree that the developer shouldn't take, and then they, for whatever reason, without discussing it with the city, take it, that should be a high fine.
How many fines has the city levied lately of trees? I mean, how common is this? I'm kind of just curious.
Not very common.
For code enforcement that I've been involved in for the past 2 years, only one.
One, okay.
When you talk about the value of the tree, are you talking about, well, if you cut it down and sold it for wood, or are you talking about if you had to buy a tree and replace it? What is the value of the tree?
So and I unfortunately don't have the actual draft language in front of me. The draft language has the guide that would walk us through that process. I'm not familiar with that, but there is a guide, and it's the same process that we use for public trees. We have that option too. That's currently in the code.
If I may.
Your mic's not on.
Your mic's not on. Thank you.
I think Gary has something.
Gary?
Yeah, I sat in obviously all the urban forestry board meetings that were discussed as the council representative, and there was an awful lot of discussion about the value of the tree and those sorts of things. I think that there were people on there that probably would have liked to have seen higher than 300, but there was also a strong feeling that that was kind of a good starting point. I think the last significant tree that we lost in this city, other than that one, was when the gentleman decided to take the street tree down outside of his house because he was dumping pine needles in his backyard and laid it down across the middle of the street and the sewer line and everything else. And that's when Corey was city manager, and we levied a big fine, and he cut it by about 2/3. So, and that's kind of stuck in the craw of a lot of people. So I think that the concept here is to try to codify this and have it be more than the cost of doing business. And I think that's what Counselor Cobb is getting to as well, is that, you know, okay, I don't want this tree here. The guy who's going to build this house doesn't want this tree here. The person going to live here doesn't want this tree here. $2,000 on a $800,000, $900,000 house, nothing. So I think it needs to be significant enough that people really stop and think about it. What the dollar amount should be, I don't know. The value of the tree, I'm a little concerned about how you assess that. I hear the concern from legal, but I don't want to stop the process of getting this in place as we move with more development to ensure we don't lose more significant trees in our community.
I'll add that uh, I'm not worried about the legal as much as I just kind of don't care for having a second document that we have to go refer to. It just adds a layer of um, just a layer of more work. I'm all for keeping it simple. And if that means it's just the one fine and it's higher or whatever we agree to as a body, I'm fine with that. I'd rather have it simple. I'd rather have it fast. I'd rather have it easy enough that if it's a multiplication problem, you have a little fine sheet that says it's this wide and it's this amount. Do the multiplication and there's the amount. I love that. I mean, I think that makes your job easier. It's much more clear to the community. You know, I don't know if it's 300 or 500, you know, I think that we can figure that out at a later date. I like the simplicity of that, though. I just think it's good governance to keep it simple instead of adding some book from tree appraisers that says, you know, this birch is more valuable than this ponderosa. You know, I don't know about that. I'd rather just keep it simple at this level. And I really want to make it so simple that it can be changed on our you know, our list of fees at the end of the year if we decide to take it up or down or whatever like that, where it's, you know what the fee is. I don't know if that's the right place to put it. I honestly don't know, but I want to make it so simple that we don't have to think about it when we're done with this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Mayor Frieden, and I think that the Urban Forestry Board would like that number to be higher. I think they kind of picked that number thinking that's what they could get away with, to be honest with you, in terms of that. They didn't want to make that last option look so onerous that it wasn't going to be considered. And I think I like the idea of simplicity. And if that means that we have a higher starting point on the dollars, I don't think you're going to have any argument from the Urban Forestry Board. In fact, you'll probably get letters of appreciation. So,
And
My only concern was when we have the forestry board go through a process and they come up with a product and they give it to the planning commission and the planning commission goes through a process and agrees with that product.
yeah,
And we come and say, nope, we're not doing that. I think that that's
You
a real
hesitate.
slap in the face to all the work that they've done. Now, I feel better knowing that Gary was there and he thinks that that wouldn't necessarily be the way that they would perceive this, but I don't know that. I'm not willing to have advisory committees that I ignore. I would like to have some assurance that if we do go down this road, that we backtrack to those committees and say, this is what we are considering doing for ease of enforcement, and you know, that we're not doing it because we think they're dunderheads, but because wow, you know, I've been.
I don't mind sending it back to them. I hate to give them more work, but if you feel comfortable that, you know, you want them to check in again, I think we can probably do that pretty easy.
Well, I just want to say that if I gave the impression that I was thinking that people are dunderheads, I apologize fully. No, I think the number one base fine, basically, I'm suggesting it be higher. And I explained why, and I agree with the mayor that we don't need the additional part.
So it's up to, I don't feel like I need to send it back. I get your concern totally. You know, as a member of the planning commission for a couple of years, I get it. But at the same time, you know, it's in our hands and we can decide what to do. If you want to send it back, I don't mind. Just say, Gary, what do you think? Sending it back and just getting them to sign off on whatever number we want to come up with?
I think they'd be very happy to do that. I actually, I appreciate your comment. The fact that it did zoom through, not zoom, but move through the planning commission without any real issues. And the only question I might have is if we raise the fine, do we step on the toes of the planning commission a little bit? But I think the advisory committee would be more than happy to re-examine the fine if you're not taking it down, but taking it up.
I don't think the planning commission has a lot of work. So I don't know. City Manager Wheeler.
I was just gonna say, this is in the development code. So to your question about the master fees and charges, this is actually codified in the development
Okay,
code.
so it is what it
If
is.
we did want to adjust in the future, it would be.
It would be just a minor code change. Okay.
We kind of talked a little bit about that when we were looking at tree removal on private property and the.
Right.
Kind of, there was a debate at council of how far we go. And then this is basically why we're here, is because that conversation then led into, well, maybe we should be a little bit more punitive towards developers that are taking advantage of situations where they're maybe felling trees that they shouldn't be, that were supposed to be retained, and maybe there should be a bigger penalty for those folks instead of penalizing homeowners that maybe, took down a tree and didn't know they had to get a permit or something like that. So that's why we have a bigger fine. For the-
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's 500 right now, right?
Yeah.
And
That's it.
that could be a 42-inch tree.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah, and then just to clarify, you're talking about the option where it's just really based on the DBH inches? And not the one where it's broken down into the 8-inch to 20-inch and then over?
yeah,
Okay.
number 3, I think was
That's what I
the,
thought. I just wanted to double check that.
Yeah.
No, I
And
mean, I'm all for streamlining it, like you said, Mayor. Okay, thank you.
Urban
and-
Forestry Board meets next week, by the way.
Okay.
you,
No, it totally
you
makes
want to
sense.
pick a number?
And I also, as long as, also our staff and, because the point is to make sure that developers are at least aware of this. And then understand that, that this isn't going to stop trees from coming down, but what we're trying to do is get them in the office to have a conversation about why they want to remove this. And, it's just, I also want to make sure that this is robust enough that we feel like this is going to draw them in and to have that conversation before somebody makes a mistake or does something.
There's a
egregious.
20-inch tree where a building envelope can only be located. They're still allowed to take some trees down. It's not preserving every tree. But it's preserving the ones that you don't have to take down. And that's what we're doing, right?
And
Correct, yeah, the-
preserving the planning commission's right to, or the planning authority's right to decide.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to pick a number that we can,
I'm still with the 500, but if somebody wants to tick that.
Gary, do you want to pick a number?
I'm comfortable with 500.
Andrea? Kind of high, isn't it? I'm comfortable with 300, but if you guys overrule me on 500, just
Where are you?
Jennifer,
Mm,
400?
I could do 400 or 500. I mean, I've lived in
It's a
this,
lot.
I've lived in this county for, 40 years. I've seen this over and over and over again of a developer, don't cut those trees. Oh, okay. And then all gone. And they're like, here's a check.
We've only had one enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just saying in my
No,
my
I'm,
lifetime, I have seen this happen over and over again. And so, it's not, and again, it's not about making money. It's just about making it painful enough that they think twice.
Deterrent.
A deterrent, yeah.
so it's a couple of 500s and
Three,
pick one. If you say 500, it's 500. Doesn't matter what we think.
400.
Okay, four.
400 here. Do I hear
Okay,
four?
there you go. So we came up with 400.
Okay.
After much deliberation.
Yes.
Gary, I expect you to smooth this over with. the
Yeah,
inner
you
board.
can, you can sum up the discussion, right?
We appreciate all the hard work that they did and we just are more punitive than they are.
Hey, if somebody takes a couple of trees out and we look at the fines and they're not enough, we can adjust it again in the development code. This is not much different than other things we've done in development code and switched it up, STRs, things. Okay,
Sounds good.
thank you. You know what to do now.
Ready.
Okay, you only got a week. Sorry.
Yeah. You got your
Just
ru-
a delete and a change of a number, so I got it.
right. He's got his ruler ready. He's ready to go.
All right. Anything else to wrap this thing up? Okay, we're gonna take a, let's just go to 6:45 so everybody gets a nice little break. We'll start the city council meeting then. The workshop's adjourned. All right, I'd like to call to order the October 9th regular city council meeting at 6:45 PM. Sorry, we're starting a little late today. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Or not. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Roll call, Rebecca, please.
Mayor Frieden,
I'm here.
Council President Blum. Councilor Ross,
Here, I think I said, you heard my name?
Councilor Lex,
Here.
Councilor Cobb.
Here.
All right, next up is the approval of the agenda.
I would move approval of the agenda.
Second.
It says as amended. Is there an amendment? Oh, okay,
Okay,
never
and
mind.
you said it perfectly. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thanks, Gary. Next up is visitor communication.
Still
Michael,
writing out. in the
He's
hall.
Hey.
out in the hall.
Michael, can you hear me?
There
You're
he
up.
is. Here he comes.
Good evening. Can you turn on the microphone, please, or Rebecca's coming? Thanks, Rebecca.
You watch the news and good evening only counts for a few. And even those few, you're kind of lacking a real conscience if it's a good evening for you. But that's, of course, is not the kind of world that I wish I lived in. Any city manager, along with anyone else, should not be there to give the impression they are understanding and willing and wanting and getting involved in solving a serious problem and are not. It would also be best if they can comprehend a person who uses analogies and parallel affected and affecting stories and situations to make more clear the primary serious situation at hand. And they should not think they are human when allowing a favorable, compartmentalized view on what's said. They also should not use the word all, as in we are here for all, when it's clearly not true. Fantasy and postured righteousness and smooth oil speaking and writing, etc., should be left only to what is clearly labeled by federal law as either pompous posturing or fairy tales or poison or fake news. And they should be teaching this at grade schools. Certainly, a lot of people will have a problem with this, including many Christians, by the book people, who will need new walled-in reservations. All I can suggest is put up with it. Many Palestinians have done this for several decades behind a cloaking veil and a whitewashed by barbaric civilization. Big change will take a lot of what occurs. This can always be exchanged by dropping dead or the start of a new form of life called growing up. This commentary is soft compared to occurrences at the grade school meeting on Sunday. So feel blessed. I'm ill and exhausted and do not belong in the pit, being eaten apart by the psychological cannibals. And yes, by federal law is a fairy tale and is labeled as such as said here.
Thank you, Michael. All right, next up is that's all for there's nobody online or anything?
There's no.
Okay, just making sure. Consent agenda, need a motion for that.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Begrudgingly, aye.
Why?
Gary was just late, that's all. It's a button, it's hard. Okay, next up, council business, we only have one item. Director Bertagna, Director of Public Works, is here to talk about an award for public improvement contract. This is very cool.
This is cool.
Talk to me. Talk to us.
Okay, so this is for the East Portal Mobility Hub project. We released the bid in early September and we received 6 bids, all from qualified contractors, majority of which were in Central Oregon. The bids range from just a little over 900,000 to about 1.238 million. Engineer's estimate was 1.15. So we're seeing about $250,000 savings from the engineer's estimate. And from the original master plan, about a $350,000 savings. So construction pricing is starting to get better, more competitive for us, which is good. And so our engineers reviewed the bids and they recommended approving McKenzie Cascade Heavy Construction's bid of $902,921.50 and authorize the city manager to enter into the contract.
All right. Does anybody have any questions?
Have we worked with this company before?
We have, they're a Central Oregon company. They do a lot of work in Redmond. They've done work for us out here, waterline work. It actually goes back to sewer installation days. They had a small schedule in that project. So we worked with them a fair amount. Great contractor, good local group of people.
Nice.
Okay. When?
When is a good question. They have to get bonds in place. We'll get contracts signed. We'll be ready to go beginning November.
That's not far.
No,
Week.
All right. Well, thanks for getting such a great bid. I'd probably entertain a motion if anybody's got one. Gary, do you have a motion? You don't have to. You're on mute. Gary, you're muted. Sorry about that.
I hit the button and turned myself off. I'll
No?
try it again. I move to award a public improvement contract to McKenzie Cascade Heavy Construction in an amount not to exceed $902,921.50 for the East Portal Mobility Hub Improvement Project, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract on behalf of the city, and further authorize the city manager to execute any necessary contract changes, orders, and or amendments within a contract contingency amount of 5% of the contract amount.
All right, we have a motion.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
I
And I can't wait to change the name from East Portal to something else.
thank you very
Gary.
much. Yeah, very exciting stuff.
It is.
Thanks, Paul.
Bet.
I got a 14-year-old. Let me know if you need some digging done out there. I have a shovel. All right. On other business, I guess it's up to you.
Staff updates. It is. I'm gonna be,
Brief?
nope. Well, always have a lot going on. I'll be doing the staff updates tonight. I'll start with administration. You may have noticed today some slight changes with our website. So it's been updated. The migration by our vendor, Civic Plus, was completed. Still working through some issues with that. If you see anything or catch anything that we haven't yet over the next week or so, let us know. But we still need to work with the vendor on just kind of making sure all the content migrated over to the new updated platform. You won't notice a whole lot of changes, but a couple things cosmetically might look a little bit different, and we're just making sure everything gets put back in the right places.
On that, I just want to say that I had a note for myself to say something about it, and I really think the website looks great. I was very impressed. So, thank you.
Yeah, that's been Rebecca handling that. So thank you to Rebecca for, it's always fun lifting over one website to, and it's all done in the back. So usually users don't really see it except for maybe some, brief downtimes and things like that. But the recruitment for boards and commissions still going on. That closes on November 8th. So in about a month here. Still lots of opportunities. I think we've only had a couple applications so far, but we're looking for budget, City Parks Advisory Board, 3 positions on the Planning Commission, and I think there's 1 seat on the Urban Forestry Board too. So a lot of opportunities there. And again, applications due November 8th. So spread the word.
Do we need to spread the word in the Nugget, you think, maybe?
Yeah, if they haven't already. Usually they run something. I was gonna, mention the community conversation on houselessness Sunday afternoon. Thank you to the mayor and Councilor Cobb, who also were there. Overall, I think it was very successful. We had, I think probably about 110 members of the community, and then, at least 25 or so folks that were volunteering or a part of the presentations, and note takers. And just observing and kind of hearing the conversations going on at the different tables, I think the format worked well. I think it was constructed conversations. I think the input from what we've seen so far in the notes, just great input, a lot of good ideas, a lot of good thoughts. I think it was a civil event.
There was no yelling.
Yeah.
Not once.
Yeah. An overall positive, just having the opportunity for the public to weigh in on this matter, I think was appreciated. And so at the event, I kind of mentioned this format, and I think I just did a snap poll, thumbs up if you like how this sort of format of having a conversation at tables. And I think it's something we would look at for other types of issues and things that maybe the community is working on in that way, instead of having sort of the formal take a mic and talk and take turns and things like that. And thank you to most of the heavy lifting was Carrie pulling this event off. So big kudos to her. And then Jen Rusk, our facilitator, has been helpful in keeping us organized and kind of planning this thing and trying to keep it organized. So next steps for that, really we got a lot of notes to go through, a lot of information. We already have a couple meetings set up to do follow-ups with our community partners, and kind of debriefing how it went, what they heard at the tables, and talking to the note takers too. If we got your notes, but what were the major themes? And then we got to, compile that and synthesize it and summarize it so we can share that back out to the public and kind of work on, okay, what are the next steps? What are the next public engagement opportunities here to kind of start developing this community action plan? And I know people are eager to kind of stay involved and keep engaged in that. So thank you this is a council goal to have this facilitated conversation to work towards a community supported plan. And I think, it's taken a few months to get here, right? Some planning work, several meetings with our agency partners and our nonprofits and things like that to kind of, okay, how do we want to do this? And I think spending time doing that and planning it paid dividends to be able to pull off a pretty good event. So now we pivot to, okay, the next thing. But good work on setting this goal and giving us the direction to move forward with it.
How long do you think it's going to take to synthesize that information and get to the next meeting? Probably November.
Yeah.
Or longer, possibly.
Yeah. So we'll have a Jen Rusk is doing other events right now, so we're gonna meet with her early next week, and then getting the 10 other groups back together. It's going to take a couple weeks. I think that's not scheduled for a few weeks. And so we'll meet. In the meanwhile.
No pressure. I mean,
No,
I'm not
yeah.
trying to,
I
I'm
think
just
yeah.
trying to get public some information of when to expect kind of the next thing, right?
Yeah, give us some time to, we just don't want to send out the raw data. We had people
No.
making notes and all that, and yeah, you're right. It's going to be in November sometime at least before we were able to kind of package it of like, here's what we heard, I think there's probably some interim things that we could do, like another letter to the editor thanking people for showing up and, kind of recapping the event. I think there was a article in the Nugget this week about it. And I know Jim and Sue were there too, so we might see more things written about it. Couple reminders, we got the League of Oregon Cities Conference is next week. I think a few of us are going. That's Thursday and Friday. Then we have a tour as part of that here in Sisters. And I think it was booked. So the mayor and I are taking the bus back with the tour. And so we're going to do a tour of the Sisters Makers building and First Street Park and sort of the community building and plaza making and the synergy with the farmers market and Sisters Makers and the barn too. We'll have Danny there to kind of talk about spurring that investment and kind of creating this space for the public to gather. And then a portion of that tour will also go up to the production facility with Sisters Coffee. So a nice chance to kind of show off the town. And it's nice to see that folks will be taking the tour out here.
They literally didn't save me a seat or Jordan's seat, so we have to ride on top of the bus.
Right. Hope it's not raining.
And somehow I just know I'm gonna end up under the bus.
Oh, no, no, they'll tie you up there. It'll be okay.
You're going to be the hood ornament.
Yeah, right.
Election season, we're in the thick of it, right? So ballots are mailed next Wednesday. And then our box here is opening next Friday. So flags will go up and everything. So, yeah, we're off and running there. We had the conversation with council this week. Only had a couple attend, but it was a great conversation. Something to talk about with the council will be, looking at maybe changing venues, maybe going out in the community to coffee shops and things like that. We can even talk about perhaps doing that in November, December, even instead of holding it here at City Hall. Maybe we'll get a little more success of folks being able to stop by. And then events this weekend, we got Harvest Fair. So starting Friday, Main, with vendors setting up, will be closed. We also have the Homecoming Parade coming down Hood on Friday. So just be aware of those impacts. I think the Homecoming Parade's at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's pretty brief, but there will be, it'll be the closure for that as well. And we moved the date for the joint meeting with the Board of County Commissioners to December 4th. So sorry for adding another meeting, but it might be a little bit better to have that kind of breathing room there to talk with the county without having a city council meeting right after it. So it's the only thing on the agenda for December 4th. I'd like to say congratulations to Joe. Another plaque or certificate for the wall, certificate for financial excellence for the annual financial report for fiscal year 22-23. So good work. Another great audit. Pivoting then to Public Works, in your consent agenda tonight, you approved the ADA ramps project for the highway here, and that's an ODOT project. That's, it's an unfortunate thing. It's a part of this statewide settlement. Every community is going through it. Every community's had the same questions of, do we have to? Every community's had the same risk assessment of should we, and what's the risk if we don't. So in consultation with our attorneys and ODOT and Paul and I, and talking through it, we're authorized ODOT to proceed with the work. They're gonna go out to bid next year in January and start the work sometime in the spring, I think April, and have to avoid any work Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day, that window. So they'll start in downtown, do outreach to the businesses. I think they already did some of that earlier this summer, but we did stress that you need to go door to door, let them know what's happening, how you're going to mitigate the impacts throughout this project.
Is there anything positive about redoing them?
Sure. Ours are going to be 10 years old soon. So, I mean, you get new concrete, you got the new ADA compliant as it stands today, ramps. The city is not on the hook for, coming into compliance with those. If we said no, we would be at some point for any kind of, I mean, we're talking like an eighth of an inch difference on slopes and things that we would eventually be, required to replace at some point. So, this gets that taken care of. We just have to make sure they're maintained at that level going forward, which we would have been anyways. So, speaking of ODOT, our roundabout is open. Obviously needs some more work there, but you can drive all the way around it and take every four-way you want. So, good to see that finally done. They're still working on some concrete, of course, with the truck bypass lane and pathway, and then of course we got striping and lighting and landscaping and stuff to do too. But
Where in that timeline would like crosswalks be?
before the winter hits, right? Week of the 20th.
This month?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Which means for ODOT, maybe November. I'm just kidding.
Contractor.
We bid opening for McKinney Butte Phase 2. That traffic safety project was yesterday. The low bid was 127,000. Our estimate was 165,000 for completing that project. So, another good bid. And I think the low bid was Keaton and King, who did the first phase. So happy to see that.
Is that adding one more crosswalk, Paul, or two? There are two more on
It's-
McKinney Butte? Three more. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's got the raised crosswalks, it's got striping, signage. Yeah, so you'll see a lot more meat on that McKinney Butte.
There's a lot of people concerned about how the school traffic patterns are working, and I keep, again, like I tend to do, is I just keep preaching patience and say, look, it's not done yet. Wait until it's done.
Yeah.
It'll be better.
And then speaking of bidding, Barclay Drive Phase 1 went out to bid today. And those bids are due about a month, right? The 5th of November. So another exciting big project for us coming up. So good to see that. A couple other things, the Hood Pine four-way stop. So we have all our signs at the shop, all the parts are here. And then our traffic engineer and city engineer are working on the striping and curbing because there's some configurations of that intersection that has to take place, but we're hoping to get everything installed by the end of the month. So for our newest safe intersection at Hood and Pine, very popular intersection demand there.
I've had a question from the community. Will those new stop signs on Hood and Pine be the flashing type like they are on Main?
Yep.
Excellent. I
They
can
are.
tell them I ordered them and they're going to be put in.
Yeah, they were delivered last week, I think, right?
The two that are on Pine are gonna be flashy, and the two that are on Hood are gonna be the same ones. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, just really similar to here. The Lazy Z pivot design is done, and then we're looking to go out to bid in early November for that part for our wastewater project. On community development, thank you to the mayor and Councilor Letts. We're at the UGB steering committee. That was the third steering committee meeting. A lot more meat at this meeting as they looked at the draft study areas.
They're 20 minutes.
Well, so there. So a lot more meat at this meeting. So the draft study areas were presented, and that included information about CCNRs in certain neighborhoods, wildlife corridors, the values of certain parcels in the developed areas, land values, proximity to utilities and slopes and things like that. So they introduced some different concepts based on the land need of the priority one lands and different options for how that might look in those priority one lands to get the acreage that we need for the units that we're looking at. And there was about a half hour or so of public comment at that meeting. So we had some attendance from a lot of the folks that were notified about being in the potential UGB study areas, which was great. Some great questions, comments, requests to come and talk to their homeowners association or property owners associations. And overall, I think it was good that they had a chance to kind of learn more about the project, understand, where we are at what stage in the process, what the benefits are, what the, potential it is if you're in the UGB and what that means. So the next steps of that project, still doing a lot of public outreach. In fact, Scott and Matt were at Oliver Lemons today, tabling, trying to share information and get people to stop over and ask questions. And then I think we're starting to work on the community open house sometime this year, either November, December, to review those alternative maps for the study areas. So that's in the works. Yep.
Yeah, on the UGB expansion, I have a friend that is, their property is going to possibly be in that expansion, and they were unable to make the meeting. Someone was sick. So the question is, can someone come to City Hall and just?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and who would they ask for?
Scott.
Scott. No, oh, Joe.
God, don't do that.
Yeah.
So is it Joe or is it Scott?
No.
It's community development.
Community development, and
Okay, Scott.
I think ask for Scott, or if Scott's not here. The other,
Finance Development Department.
he's handling a lot of call. His number was on the letter that went out, so he was a lot of emails and calls and
Okay.
questions.
There was about 30 people there, I would say. Does that sound about right?
Pretty full room, yeah.
Like 3 rows. Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's cool.
Yeah, overall.
It just shows we're engaged. I mean, again, we have people here tonight. Thank you for being here.
Another example how direct outreach to an address.
Right?
There's
It's nerd activity for sure.
It did. There's been 5 articles in the Nuggets, been in the newsletter multiple times, but you get that direct letter from the city. You're like, oh, okay. Maybe I should.
I got
should
2
go.
phone calls about it, so 2 people.
Okay.
Was it good news?
They were surprised, but I told them, how more surprised would you be if you were in the study area and didn't get a letter? And then you found out later.
Yeah.
I told them, I said, that's a good thing. I said, it's just you're within a mile of the city limits. That's all it means. It doesn't mean you're anything else other than that.
So Dark Skies, the second draft of the application went to Dark Sky International for their comments. And so getting that much closer to getting our final application in. The staff had been doing some late night audits. I think last council meeting, Scott was out there with Jackson and looking at the town at night to see light. And so I think we're aiming to get that final application in by the end of the year. And then after that, we start working on with the committee that's been helping out. I think it's Rima, sort of. Part of this committee. So the next kind of task for that committee and staff will be public education. Once we get our application in, now under review, and then we can start pivoting to education and kind of maybe incentives for conversions to dark sky compliant lighting. We talked about wildfire tonight. It's great to have the fire district here, and as a part of that process, I know they've been meeting. The wildfire mitigation meetings are back going on now that we're almost done with fire season, which has been very long.
NIPSI just put it up to preparedness level 5 today nationally.
Yeah, it's not over.
Yeah,
Um,
the second time that's ever happened in October. Yeah.
It's Holly Jukes was at the homeless community conversation and kind of talking about how it's still deep in fire season and basically that's her job, and it's been going on since June. over 2 million acres have burned, in Oregon.
Record.
Yeah, which is a record. And as Counselor Lett said,
Nice that they're out there mowing or whatever you call, what they're.
Clearing.
doing, Clearing the
Yeah.
sagebrush and stuff out. I don't know that they're rolling right over anybody who's living there or not, but
Oh, yeah, they just mow them under.
yeah.
Yeah.
Scatter the dust, the poor guy. Wake them up early in the morning.
The interesting thing about, I think, the fire season is there hasn't been a lot of fires locally.
Yeah.
They're just.
We've been impacted by smoke. There's been, late season fires in the Deschutes National Forest, but overall, our immediate surrounding area, but
We've been very lucky.
we've been lucky, and it doesn't mean we want to take our foot off the pedal at all. So,
Tonight was proof, right? I mean,
yeah.
Not gonna do it.
And then, our next scheduled meeting, is on October 23rd. And you get to have more UGB. So, the same kind of, work the steering committee has been doing, will be coming to council for a workshop. So you guys see that information too at the council level. I think the board and commission, interviewers will need to be selected, since those applications will be coming in, right after that. So that's what's on the agenda so far. Yeah, and that's it.
that's it.
That's it.
Good job.
Nicely done.
All right, it's up to us. Gary, go first so you can finish up.
Yeah, sure. Nothing really to report. The Urban Forestry Board will be meeting next week, so I'll pass along what was discussed. And Andrea, you may be very assured or reassured or whatever, maybe assured, but that I will indeed make sure that they're comfortable with the decision, and if they're not, bring it back to this group. I don't anticipate they'll take it the wrong way. I think that there was a lot of discussion about should it be higher, and everybody kind of settled on that amount just because wondering if we could even get that much, I think. So, but thank you for those comments. The other thing I want to say is, as you are aware, I will be not available until December for meetings, and I believe that Councilor Cobb will not be attending in December, as I recall. So I want to say something. This is Councilor Cobb. Thank you for your dedicated service to our community. Your thoughtful insights, thorough preparation, active participation in debates and community is a credit to you. Your work has made this council better. The value of your service to this community cannot be overstated. I personally will miss sitting next to you at all of our meetings. Thank you.
Very kind. Thank you.
Dang, Gary, you set the bar high now.
I'm done.
Okay, who would like to go next?
I don't have anything.
You don't have anything?
I do not.
Okay.
The last 2 weeks, the mayor and I attended the councilor coffee. We had two people, some of the usual topics, I think the advantage, and I think they expressed that, is that, it is a nice opportunity when there's not a lot of people, that you just can have a nice conversation and ask whatever you want. And, there isn't that intimidation factor or anything. So definitely low number, but still, I think always worth the time. I attended the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee for Deschutes County. We held our meeting in Lapine, and that was fun to go down there and learn about what's going on down there. And I know that we're at opposite ends of the county, and Lapine and Sisters have differences. However, we have way more similarities in the respect of our, growth, fire danger, a major highway going right down the middle of our city that we're also developing at the same time, and same stressors and all that. So kind of fun to go down there and learn about their bike ped needs down there, which are growing significantly. And there's a lot more interest in it now than there ever has been, so that was encouraging. And the other thing that came out of that conversation was one of our members who's on the board of Commute Options for Central Oregon kind of alerted us that the agreement with Commute Options and CET that was fully funding a lot of the van pools in Central Oregon was going to be relatively abruptly cut. partially, I think, an oversight on how fast the money was going out the door. So, which is, yeah, I've kind of shared that information with our EDCO representative, for instance, because we do have businesses in Sisters that use that BAM pool program to get employees here from far and away places, I think, like Redmond and Prineville. And definitely a huge incentive for a lot, not only businesses, but school districts use it. A lot of entities use it. I think there were 70 in Central Oregon. So it was kind of promised by CET and COIC that them and Commute Options are both working independently on trying to rebuild that / find more funding for it. So, I mean, I think it's pretty clear to them how important that is. So,
I think we have 6 or 7 employees that regularly use that program. Personalized Nutrients has a few, and metabolic maintenance, and
mhm.
there may be others.
Yeah, yeah, so we don't want to lose that. The UGB meeting, that,
That I left early? That's what you were gonna say?
yeah, you were just left in a huff, you pushed some tables over, it was very dramatic. Wait, that wasn't you.
That wasn't me.
That didn't happen. I think the thing that came out of that was interesting to me as a clarification was that, you know, depending on where we go, obviously, almost no land, especially in those exception lands, which are gonna be our first choice, almost none of those lands are not, you know, they have some level of development on them. Maybe it's a house or maybe it's more than that, right? So when we're looking at the 250 acres, is that the number that we banter about? Granted, any expansion could be less than 250 acres, it could be 250 acres, but it might actually be more than 250 acres when you, because we do have the ability to subtract out already developed portions of those lots, you know, so just to
For
kind of-
areas that are undevelopable.
Yeah, exactly.
within there.
Right, because there's some directions we'd be going into floodplain of like maybe an Indian Ford, if you know, or White Shoes Creek, if we went, you know, east and north, so. You know, I just like to point that out as a clarification, because, you know, I certainly don't want anybody to say, well, you only said 250 acres and then it's 270, you know, you don't want to go down that road, so. You know, just kind of trying to put that out there publicly that, you know, the number's a little soft, but there's good reason for it.
That was good. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
horribly clear on that either, so I learned something as well. And then I attended the superintendent's coffee with the school district, and the conversation there was mostly about bus routes, crosswalks, and that they were working with the city to kind of tweak the traffic over there. You know, and then I was able to corner, their one board member, Jeff Smith, that usually attends, and just told him, I said, hey, we're really interested in doing a joint meeting sometime, or, you know, with the school board, and, you know, so just wanted to plant that seed with you, and he seemed very interested in that, and, you know, excited about that opportunity. You know, we're right across the street, so relatively convenient, so yeah, just doing that outreach. And that's it.
Okay. The one thing I've noticed about the, you know, the single campus traffic situation is if I do it every day, some of us do it every day, right? If you're going 20 and you're paying attention, it's really not that bad. I think it works really well, and I really like the new crosswalks. They're concrete, they pop. They got the little sign in the middle. They're hard to miss. So, you know, just pay attention and take a deep breath, and
Yeah.
it'll be okay.
It's like a 15-minute window in the day that
Yeah.
it's like that, and then it all disappears.
Luckily, my kid likes to go early, so I'm in and out of there by 8:02.
Yeah, nice.
So I miss all the crazy parts. But anyway, go ahead.
Had a recent COACT meeting, and interesting, we were looking at statewide transportation improvement funds, STIF funds, and statewide transit network program grant funds. And what we're looking at right now is prioritizing the requests for transit. And one of them is a request for $750,000 for van pool program transition support.
Yeah, Tammy Bainey from COIC had mentioned to me that, when I followed up with her, that they
And-
said they were aggressively approaching the STIF funding as a solution to the problem, so good
Out
to
of,
hear that.
out of the 11 requests,
Yeah,
10 of them are channeled through COIC. I mean, it's amazing how much.
They're getting good at what they do.
Yeah, and, Pacific Crest bus line between Bend and Klamath Falls, Central Oregon Breeze, Veterans, Healthcare, Cascade Lakes, and Smith Rock. They're talking about putting some transportation up there, improving security at the transit hubs, preventive and maintenance, the Bend route operations and, project maintenance, I guess it is, okay. And of course, everybody needs their buses replaced.
I'm tired of climbing Smith Rock. I want to take a bus to the top.
Yeah, let's just take a bus up there. But one of them is one that comes up fairly regularly, and that's the bus that comes from John Day to Bend. You know, they put in their request on their end, and then we try and support them on this end. So, because I see it outside Costco fairly regularly, and I think, oh, that must just be a lifesaver.
now they
For
get to
them.
drive farther now.
Yeah.
Get to Costco.
Yes, but I'm sure, given the whole trip, that probably isn't a thing. So, of course, there is $61 million in requests and only 25 million in funding, so that's the way life is going on. And all my other meetings are next week. So the following week, if there's anything exciting, I'll bring it to you then.
Yeah, okay, it's up to me.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot other than now that I have a kid in high school. I look back and elementary school was a breeze and middle school wasn't all that difficult compared to high school. That's what I've learned. But that's okay. That's part of what it is. I think we're doing some great things in the community. I'm very proud of all of our staff and how we go about things. So thank you. Some of it's easy stuff, some of it's hard stuff, but it's all pretty fun. So keep doing that. I was surprised to see Robin out there yesterday, the day before, still working out there, doing her thing. I think it's great. She's as good as ambassador, but for this community as anybody, if you ask me.
She's
leaving next
golden.
week.
She's leaving next week. Well, somebody give her a hearty thanks from all of us up here because she's the kind of people we want working for the city. And you guys are all that, but she's more visible than the rest of you, just about.
Are the campground hosts still here too?
One's still here. The other one left today.
Okay.
And I want to make a comment on the campground house. They're, besides being wonderful and everything else, I had a friend staying there over the weekend. I went actually to rented a site because I was coming in late. And my doorbell rang in the morning and it was the campground host. And she said, "Your friend just fell and hit his head. I don't know. Do you want to go check on him?" So I went over and checked on him, and that's the kind of people we have there, is my point. She knew I lived in the neighborhood. She asked him if he needed anything. He said no, but she came to get me because she knew he might open up to me over someone else. And they're really good. And I applaud staff for finding them, and I applaud them for sticking with us.
All right. Other than that, same old, same old. See you next time.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
It
it's,
just made me think of same topic, so.
no, it's all good.